Sounds fishy to me. You know what else sounds fishy to me? Young Brian Last, the whole situation going on in AEW that we just reported on a couple days ago on the Drive-Thru, your program. It was unfolding and the news was slipping out, eking out, dripping out, whatever, as we were recording the program. But just to bring everybody up to date, AEW has a brand new 2-hour primetime television broadcast set to debut on June 17th on Saturday nights on TNT called Collision. And at the network upfronts and the big announcements of same, they were supposed to announce that the star of our show would be CM Punk, and the debut taping, or not taping, it's live, the debut broadcast would emanate from the United Center in lovely Chicago, Illinois, the Windy City, and the title that we have heard leaked for the event was The Second Coming. And within less than 24 hours before all those announcements were going to be made, Tony or someone in his periphery or orbit in the company managed to either fuck up or we still don't know how the word got out that close to I say they were trying to fucking run one by him. I say they were trying to pull a fast one, and he found out about it in the nick of time. But they reneged on their previous agreement, as has been reported by multiple sources, to not rehire Ace Steel, because Ace Steel was rehired now, we come to find out, number of weeks or even months ago, part of obviously their contrition for him being the only one that got fired over this to begin with, when he wasn't even the one that started it, he was just the one that finished it off. So they managed to fuck this up because Punk got word that no, they're not going to have Ace Steel come back to work to do what he's supposed to be doing, which is being the agent and producer for the top star in the company on the brand new 2-hour national cable television program. But instead, they'll send him a check. I guess they rehired him. They'll pay him, but he can just call Tony on the phone and tell Tony what he thinks over the phone about shit. And that somehow they think that is going to honor any kind of deal that was made to get all these parties back on television and moving forward with the new television program. And so obviously those announcements that I mentioned were not made because Punk said, oh, hell no, what the fuck? And again, Brian, and I will turn it over to you for any comment you might have or update you might be aware of, but it's another example of Tony making a deal that's a deal until somebody tells him they don't want him to make a fucking deal. Am I correct in this?
Again, we don't know because we can't really say what Tony Khan's mindset truly is, but it seems like from everything we've seen publicly reported, Tony Khan is agreeing to certain things to the top talent that he's negotiating with, and then somehow from that point until execution, monkey wrenches keep getting thrown in the way that cause what we're supposed to believe is the boss's intent to not happen the way he wanted it to. And how many times does that need to happen before you make some changes?
And again, the information being leaked out, or sources have said that some people in the company wouldn't be comfortable with Ace coming back to work in person. And we mentioned on the Drive-Thru, those same people weren't comfortable with Punk either, which is why this whole ridiculous, farcical fucking brand split is being instituted to put him over there because the other ones are so fucking childish and immature and it's romper room that they can't fucking be in the same building with him and they're scared. And if you're a man, say you're a man, if you're a mouse, squeak. But nevertheless, then the same guy that was on the same side of the issue that is being sent over here to Saturday night, now the other guy can't be over there. Who's going to be uncomfortable over there? Does Ace Steel have a long history of axe murder? Here is it a case of, you know what? I'm pretty sure if you don't fuck with this guy and you're not in a goddamn fist fight with a friend of his, he's probably not going to bother you.
But again, we're assuming that, or you're assuming, because I don't know if it's necessarily a fair assumption that the talent are really the ones causing this not to happen.
Well, in double duty, talent or EVPs. The point is the offended parties that are still have their panties in a twist over a fight in a locker room 6 months ago, them or their friends would have the only reason to have any issue with this whatsoever, right?
But is this not happening? Or the way this didn't happen? However you want to look at it. Because it happened. Apparently Ace Steel, from what we've seen publicly reported, has been under contract to AEW since April. So, for everyone who thought Jericho pitched the idea of Ace Steel, no. He was already working there, apparently. And for everyone who thought it wasn't going to happen until everyone cleared it, no, Tony already said yes. So now it becomes about the execution. And again,
because they're paying him to work, they just won't let him come to work.
Yeah, no, they want to give him it seems like, an Iron Sheik deal. Where it's like, here's all this money, stay home. Just, we don't want to see you. Here's a bunch of money not to be seen. But the question really is Tony Khan's legal team or his advisors, whoever you want to think of here, are they telling him Ace can't be here because the talent are upset? Or are they telling him Ace can't be here because you and your dad will get sued if he bites another person? Like, what is that? That's the thing we don't know. We're all making assumptions. What is Tony actually being told by his team?
Okay, I've got a great gimmick then. Put him in the fucking Hannibal Lecter mask, and he'll be the hottest heel in the fucking company. Wheel him out, and he's got the thing where he can't bite anybody. But
be the hottest heel in the locker room.
Again, I think back, and in the history of wrestling, how many fights and incidents there have been amongst people that then, whether they either turned it into fucking money in terms of at the gate, or just learned to coexist, or one guy moved on and went somewhere else to diffuse the situation or whatever. And this was not that big of a fucking deal. A guy got a fucking black eye punched in the face. A guy got fucking whacked over the head with a chair. A guy got bit on the arm. For fuck's sake. And this has been 6 months ago. And if you're talking about someone who was involved in something, asking other people, or, legal liability, or fucking, is someone uncomfortable with this person around? This is a fucking wrestling business. Do you think in 1996, Vince looked across his dining room table from me at a booking meeting and said, "Hey, Jim, I know you're friends with Arn Anderson. You guys have known each other for a while, but do you mind if I book Sid Vicious, even though that he stabbed Arn multiple times with a pair of scissors and sent him to the hospital with a goddamn blood loss?" It never came up. And I knew not to fucking bring it up because he was going to do what he was going to do. And also, we were pretty sure that if we kept a halfway good eye on Sid, he wasn't going to fucking stab anybody anymore.
Someone called the seamstress, hide all the scissors. Sid is in the house.
Well, they did go to plastic utensils in catering, but nevertheless, that may have been a coincidence. But I actually liken this, truthfully, more to Randy Savage, Bill Dundee, Jerry Lawler, Jerry Jarrett. Think about this for a second. you've got two guys that have tremendous heat because of a real life situation, Randy Savage and Bill Dundee. And everybody knows the story. Savage ambushed Dundee in the parking lot in Nashville at the gym and broke his jaw. And Dundee was off for I think it was about 4 to 6 weeks. That it not only cost him money, but it cost Jerry Jarrett money because Dundee was a main event guy. But then, what was it, 2 years later or whatever, all of a sudden now, ICW is folding. Angelo calls Jerry, tries to make some peace. Well, as we've talked about with our Mid-South deep dives and our retrospectives on the Midnight Express and all the things that were happening at that time in Memphis and Louisiana, Jerry Jarrett was best friends with Bill Dundee. Dundee had been his booker and one of his top stars for fucking years. And here's goddamn Randy Savage, who not only had worked for the Outlaw promotion that had done everything they could to damage their business, but had actually fucking broken Dundee's jaw and put him out of business for fucking 6 weeks, cost them all money. But Jerry Jarrett says, I got a fucking way to make that money back. And at the same time, Lawler and Dundee had been grating on each other. So Jerry Jarrett gets Bill Dundee the job as booker for Bill Watts. Dundee makes more money in 1984 than he'd ever made in the wrestling business up to that point, which was a pretty penny. Bill Watts has his record year with Dundee booking. We all get jobs. Then Jarrett brings Randy Savage and Lanny Poffo in and Angelo. And he didn't ask any of fucking Dundee's friends, do you mind? I know he broke Bill's jaw and fucked with him for a long time, but no, because there was no more personal issue. It was diffused, and now they were doing business. And Lawler works with Savage and trusts him with his body, and they draw money. It's God damn it. And actually, I should mention, if people think, well, a broken jaw and getting clocked over the head with a chair, depending on which story you believe, he was either fucking had knucks in his hand or was using Dundee's gun that he'd wrestled away from Dundee to fucking pistol whip him. Because there was a firearm involved in that, and it was almost used. There's serious shit that goes on with people. But again, this was nothing but one of these fights in Major League Baseball. This wasn't even, nobody was after somebody with a gun in the parking lot. Nobody used a razor blade.
You know, a couple seasons ago, the Mets got a big shortstop, Francisco. Well, in height he's short, but Francisco Lindor, who is a all-star shortstop, and he didn't necessarily fit in so great. That first year was a little awkward, and there was a situation where he and Jeff McNeil, between innings, reportedly he had Jeff McNeil against the wall by his throat. They were having some kind of physical issue because of something that happened on the field. After that game, when the media asked about it, both guys said, oh, there was a squirrel. We were looking at squirrels in the hallway. They protected it. They were mad at each other. They settled it. Now they're good. But they weren't going to let it spill out. They were going to deal with it, not go and say, I demand to be traded away from this team because that animal is there.
And again, and either handle it or don't handle it, but keep it in-house. Everybody had to hear about this because everybody's a drama queen now. And most of these guys in the locker room had never seen anybody have an actual fight in the locker room before. But that's why I'm saying, if you're in the wrestling business, and even if you've only been in it a while, if you had some whiff of the actual business before it turned into this Disney on Ice on tour thing, this was not a big goddamn deal. As we talked about at the time, the only unusual aspect of the all-out post-scrum bench clearer was that, number one, there was a group of people involved on each side. It's usually one on one side and one on the other, and a bunch of people trying to break it up. And two, that there was actually somebody representative of the office that was on one side of it. But otherwise, this was a minor incident. And everybody's told the story about Bruiser and Bruiser Brody, Dick the Bruiser and Bruiser Brody. Guy that Brody especially, but a lot of guys, if they weren't mad about their payoffs, that's the way they fucking went in and registered that displeasure, and they either got fired or fucking paid. And then, does anybody now that I've said that, I guess half the people don't know what I'm fucking talking about.
Probably not.
Okay. Basically, Dick the Bruiser, and I remember this because I was still watching the TV as before I got into business, 1980, 81. Dick the Bruiser, the dying days of his promotion in Indianapolis, brings in Bruiser Brody, who they called King Kong Brody, to work Indianapolis because Bruiser had no territory left and he needed a big name opponent. And he was more like Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, and a spot show or two, right? That was kind of it. And he was obviously expected to be fair with Brody. So anyway, one night Brody gets his check and says this is bullshit and goes through the building to the babyface locker room and into Bruiser's locker room. And this is Dick the Bruiser. In 1955, he was Brock Lesnar. But this is 1981, and it's Bruiser Brody. And I think Brody even said, give Dick credit. He stood right up to me, and here we went. But Brody had Dick around the neck and was bashing his head against the fucking lockers and busted him open. And so the next night, they walked in the fucking building, and here comes Bruiser and hands Brody his fucking check. Point taken. It's not that big a fucking deal, except for these kids that are festering about it because they got beat in a fight. They got fucking told off at a press scrum, and everybody knows that the points were valid that Punk made. So their fucking pussies need powdered, but move on. Get over it. It's ridiculous. Now they still keep putting, as you said, monkey wrenches in this thing when deals are done and people are assuming that things are going to happen based on what they've been told, and then suddenly it's never that way. And every time that it's close to an announcement of Punk or a return of Punk, something like this happens. And they act like it's Punk's fault.
It's Tony Khan's fault. He keeps allowing this to happen. It's his people. Tony Khan, I don't care who he gets on the phone with and tries to be a peacemaker in this, he's letting this all happen. So in one way or another, he likes this drama.
Anyway, one more real quick, because I love the Gary Hart missing link story. But it illustrates this is childish shit these days. Fucking missing links working Dallas for World Class, Fritz Von Erich. Gary Hart is the booker, Uncle Gary. And Link was a different type of individual. And at one point, he went up to Carrie. I don't know if they were married yet. I think it was still Carrie's girlfriend, later wife, and asked her if the carpet matched the drapes. So Gary, of course, hears about it. And Gary fucking calls Link over one day. And I don't know if, I'm sure it was probably more heated than this. I'm sure it was a longer discussion. Gary told me the story in brief, but I can hear in Gary's voice, brother, you cannot talk to the man's girl that way. If Fritz tell me to fire you, I'm going to fire you like that. And that's going to be a shame for both of us. So be cool, right? But apparently this did not sit well with Link. And he walks in the next day, and Gary's sitting on the goddamn bench in the sportatorium locker room there, those swinging doors and those old wooden benches. And Gary said he was sitting there and he saw the door swing open, and suddenly, bam, side of his head exploded. Link, who was 260 and jacked up, had just sucker punched him right in the side of the fucking head, right in the temple, knocked him to the floor with goddamn, a blind shot, right? And Gary's on the floor and he's on his knees, bent over. But what Link was too stupid to realize about Gary, and I've seen it, if you ever see pictures of Gary Hart in the old days when they had heat in Florida or Texas or wherever, 60s and 70s, he's coming back from the ring, the cops are around him, he's got one of his kabuki or one of his tag teams, somebody with him. a lot of times you'd see he'd have his hand inside his jacket. Looked like Napoleon sometimes. Inside every time that Gary went to or from the ring, inside his jacket, not in his pocket where he would have to dip, but just taped right in there, he had a single-sided razor blade where he could lay hands on it at any time. And goddamn, nobody uses razor blades to shave anymore, Brian, but do they still know that there's the double-sided that are sharp on both edges, and there's a single-sided that you can, like when you scrape paint off glass and shit with one of those.
When you get shaved at the barber.
Well, a lot of people aren't that fucking opulent.
Opulent? It costs like $8.
Well, it cost me fucking dick all of shit to shave myself, and I don't
Sounds too expensive.
Don't have to let anybody next to my throat with a fucking blade. But anyway, so Gary had a single-sided razor blade inside his jacket every time he was on the way to and from the ring. But even in his personal daily life, I've seen it. He had one of those flip open wallets, like a, two-sided thing, and you could just flip it open. And right inside that wallet that he kept right inside his jacket pocket was a single-sided razor blade with a piece of white athletic tape on the sharp side taped right there. He could pull that thing out. And when Link had clocked him and he had gone down on the ground face first on his knees, he reached in his jacket pocket, and as Link got him to pick him up and do whatever the fuck, he just sliced the missing link across the middle of his fucking stomach from asshole to appetite. And that'll change your fucking emotion real quick. And Link looked at that and fucking took and grabbed his bag and left, and that was his notice on both parts. He never came back, and they never expected him back. And no cops were called, and nothing ever happened. And Link went to work for Vince in the WWF. Remember, it was managed by Bobby Heenan.
Well, that was very brief, and that actually may have been before then.
I think it was the last time Link was in Dallas was 83, wasn't it?
No, because he had the brief run with Vince, and then he worked for Watts in 86, and then I think he went back to work after that.
That was the last time. It was the last time, because that was pretty much, actually, that was pretty much his notice from the business. He worked some outlaw shows in Texas after that.
And again, an interesting figure, not to go off on too much of a side thing, but in an era when everyone had those big physiques, he had already been a veteran for a long time, so all of a sudden he changed his physique and got really, I hate to say roided up, but that's what it looked like.
Yeah.
And then it was said that he also
shaved the head. Nobody knew it was Dewey Robertson.
Shaved the head, may have indulged in some extra party favors during that period of time. So he was Dewey Robertson in the 70s. He was a completely different guy. You talk to a lot of people in the 80s.
Yes. And also became a nudist, from what I understand, at one point.
With that haircut. That's interesting.
There was nothing sprouting anywhere else on him, just right on the front of the top of that was the only hair.
Maybe that's the move. You go to the nude beach and no one looks at your tiny dick because everyone's looking at that hair. What the fuck's going on there?
Well, what the fuck's going on here? So the point, I don't even know if we finished the topic, but basically that's the update with Punk and Steel and
any, I guess not, because I was about to say, I'm thinking of the repercussions of the Rogers, Bill Miller, Carl Gotch incident, and that was kind of the end of Buddy's career, or towards the end of it, within the last few years, so there weren't like 10 years after that where we could have seen how everyone coexisted.
Yeah, I guarantee you that if Buddy Rogers had not had the heart issues and retired, that if he was still around as a booker or top guy or whatever, that he would have tried to figure out some way to get even with both those guys. And it probably wouldn't have been hard to stop Gotch from being booked because the promoters didn't like him that much anyway because he's so fucking bland and didn't want to get beat. But Bill Miller was a star for another, 10 or 12 years.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, some of these people just fade into obscurity. And you know what? Sometimes that's a good thing because, Brian, think about this. AEW and Tony Khan, his legal department or compartment or baggage or whatever he's got, they're not doing a good enough job of covering their tracks when they're going back on these deals, or they're leaving evidence laying around because, people know who they are and where they are and all that kind of stuff. And you don't want that. In today's modern environment, when all these people are trying to put surveillance on you and put tracking on you and have satellites keeping an eye on you and watching what you do, and your internet providers, they're in your walls, and they also, the Wi-Fi admin, whoever the fuck they are, they're keeping an eye on you. They're writing everything down in their little notebooks. The hackers are waiting to hack into you and hack up your shit. That's why you need ExpressVPN on your team. And we've been talking about this. As a matter of fact, Brian, now clarify this for me. You're saying that if you are a subscriber to ExpressVPN, not only will they hide your unique IP address so that nobody can use that to find out your location or what you've been doing online, but also were you explaining to me that it makes you completely invisible as a human being, to where that
I did
you
not
could
say
just
that.
Well, now I thought you were explaining to me that it's only if you're a subscriber to. I thought it was just if you're a subscriber to ExpressVPN, then you can see other subscribers, but you can't see regular people. But you explained to me that it's in reverse, that they can't see you. Because I remember you doing the John Cena thing where you said, I can't see you.
And I did say that, and that was because you were talking about how this would make you invisible, and I was trying to explain that that is not correct, and I guess you've accepted that, so now you've assigned it to me, like I'm the one who said it.
Well, but is there one side or the other in this, that it'll make you invisible still, or nobody is invisible?
There is no cloak of invisibility in the real world.
Just your information online, your online activity, whatever you've been up to.
The virtual realm.
Photography?
The virtual realm.
The virtual realm. You're invisible in the virtual realm. So when you go out in the yard or you go out in your public life, if you have one of those virtual reality helmets and you put that on, then you'll be completely invisible and you can shoplift with impunity. You can reach out and grab people up the ass and they won't know who's there because they can't see you.
Well, no.
That type of thing.
No, not like that type of thing. No.
Well, I thought if you were in the virtual realm, you'd be invisible.
Well,
but it's only to your computer. And also your cell phone. Well, as a matter of fact, they say ExpressVPN subscriptions cover up to 5 devices at the same time. So like you could make your computer invisible, your laptop invisible, your cell phone invisible. Can you make your mother-in-law invisible? Yes, that covers up to 5 devices so you can protect your entire family. I don't know whether you want to protect your mother-in-law, but you can certainly make her fucking disappear if you talk to the right people.
Well, let's not joke about that.
Well, I'm saying if you talk to expressvpn.com/JCE, that's where you need to go, expressvpn.com/JCE. You can learn more about it. You're going to get an extra 3 months free on a 1-year package. So let's say you want to get your mother-in-law, Gertrude Phoebe Bottom. You want to get her an ExpressVPN subscription, and they can make her disappear. And nobody will know where she is or what she's up to because they won't be able to track her down. Except if you're not close enough where you can hear that rapping on the fucking hood of that fucking car, you're not going to know where Gertrude is. So again, folks,
there will be no Gertrudes that will be in trunks with ExpressVPN. However, when you are at home on the internet,
you can climb into your trunk if you want to. That's up to you. You have the freedom to do that as an American citizen.
It's probably not a great idea unless you have an exit plan.
That's true. Some cars have the little latch or a little button, but other ones don't.
Then what are you going to do?
Well, right now you're going to go to expressvpn.com/JCE because they are going to encrypt and reroute 100% of your outline or online activity and reroute it so that nobody can see it. 1 click, 5 devices. They're rated #1 by CNET. Aren't they the people in the Terminator that the machines were going to take over the world? CNET?
No, that's C-SPAN.
Oh, well, they say they're #1. Wired, Tech Radar, and countless others that are too numerous to count are all saying that ExpressVPN is number one and the big bad tech wolf is a menace to society. So to protect yourself against their prying eyes, go right now, expressvpn.com/JCE, 3 months free on a 1-year package. And how much is too much to spend on your security and peace of mind? For heaven's sake, do you want some goddamn Russian troll bot from Vladivostok to have naked pictures of your Aunt Gertrude?
Why does she have naked photos of herself on the computer?
Well, fuck, she uploaded them to prison to cure the sex offenders. expressvpn.com/JCE.
I'm glad she got it out of the trunk to do that.
Well, the poor thing, though, I'll tell you, if it wasn't for her acne when she was a teenager, she wouldn't have had any shape at all.
Well, I think we were saying ExpressVPN.
That's what I said.
With the promo link and code.
.com/JCE. Just /JCE. They'll do the rest. ExpressVPN.
ExpressVPN.